Is it alive? It is alive. Is it human? It is human. Those two things cannot be refuted. It is alive. It is human. That is the scientific consensus. The question comes is, when do we start caring about it, right?
Yeah.
When is it conscious? When does it have a soul? Those are things we can't even ask because we don't understand them. Someone's allowed to think you're evil for doing it, and someone's allowed to think you're righteous for doing it. But the facts are, it is alive, and it is human. And the facts also are, your autonomy, right, that kind of right, it technically is also a right.
So if we pull together the Roe v. Wade thing, one side is arguing a legal thing, a legal matter, and one side's arguing focus is on like the moral side. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's weird too because a lot of the law was, at least when like society was first like birth, a lot of the law was based on morals. Even like even something like an eye for an eye, even though that's horrible, it's like gruesome, it's still based on morals. They're like, well, morally, if you do something to one person, they should be able to do it to you. Like, no, that's bad, but that was the morals back then. I do think a lot of law is based on morals, but I think that's also the wrong word. What we should be using is ethics. Ethics is societal morals. Morals are individual beliefs, right? So I think what a lot of people have the problem with is when you say something that's immoral and someone says, no, I don't think that's immoral. You can't really change each other's mind. But when you're talking about the law, are we basing it off of what we want or what we think is right? Because there's a lot of things we want that we can't do, and there's a lot of things that we do that aren't right. So it's like, when it comes to questions about like whether it's this individuality, if it's like, hey, yeah, I'm a boy, I'm a girl, I want to get an abortion, or you can't get an abortion, or you can practice you could be a Muslim, you could be a Christian, whatever it is. It's so hard because there's so many moving pieces and everyone's different. And there's like most things in life, it's like, should you walk barefoot on a 103-degree blacktop? No. But when it comes to like, should you or should you not have an abortion? Should you or should you not change your physical body because you're transgender, whatever? Like, there's so many nuanced things in that. That's why everyone's having such a hard time with it, you know? Fuck.
Dude, that's that whole thing you just said was actually spot on as fuck. And I think that is the discrepancy people are struggling with, because, you know, a lot of the argument is it's not right to have someone else's rules over my own body. It's inside my own body. And then the other argument is, well, that's not like, you don't have the right because that's not, you know, it's in your body, but it's like, that's a human being. And then the other people are like, well, that's not. And then one side says it's science. And then the other person says, yeah, but it's science, but it's still not right. And then they're saying, well, it's a legal thing. And they're saying it shouldn't be a legal thing. It shouldn't have that kind of power over someone. And that's a dynamic that I can't even figure out how we would potentially start that conversation of going anywhere. It's just going in circles. It's just literally going in circles. And one side's very sure of one side and the other is very sure of the other side.
There's so much going on, but like, okay, like, I'm a human being. I do have an opinion. I think even fence sitters, people that sit on the fence, most of them, and I'm like at least 90% of them, they have a definite opinion.
Of course.
Whereas the other 10%, like, they're just like, I really don't know. But the 90% have an opinion and they're afraid to say it out loud. I get that. I can relate to that. But if, like, I know we went this whole different place with abortion, but if we're talking about abortion, I definitely have an opinion. If we're talking about like individuality and choosing gender and stuff, I have less of an opinion because I think one is actually more serious than the other. So it's something that has to be you have to take into consideration a lot more things on one over the other.
But and that's the argument, is that one side takes that and runs with abortion in that sense, where they say it's important because it matters as a form of life for a human being. But then the other side's argument is not on that. They're not arguing that point. And I think that's why the argument never gets anywhere, because the conservative side, the one I've seen at least on social media, is they're saying you're killing a human being. You're killing a baby. And especially comedians have been saying this. They'll be like, look, you can do whatever you want with your body, but you still killed a human being. Like, that's their argument. And then the other side is saying, look, I'm not arguing that. I'm saying they shouldn't have the right, no matter what is right or wrong, they shouldn't have the right to tell me if this is one way or the other. And that's why it's like they're butting heads, but they're honestly not even butting heads. They're banging their heads on walls that aren't even in the same room together. They're literally just fighting, and they're not talking about the same fucking thing. So how are we supposed to get anywhere?
That's funny. Yeah, well, this has always been one of those big things that people can't discuss, right? Because um, there's some people that, and I've talked to you about this before, and this is going to sound really cliche for a lot of people that are used to this, but they say that the abortion thing could be the lead up to another civil war, um, because it is such a huge moral question. And so in the first civil war, there were so many things going on to lead up to that civil war. I mean, like countless things. And today we have countless problems. But when you open a book about the first civil war, what do you read? What does it talk
Slavery.
about? Slavery. What's on the cover? Slavery. When you open the book to the second civil war, what's going to be on the cover? Probably abortion. I mean, like, if that happens. I honestly think we're closer to a World War III than a Civil War. But some people, like, what just came out recently? Like 50% of Americans are like, and I don't know who the fuck's doing this polling. It might be like Steve Harvey, who fucking knows. But someone's like, yeah, 50% of Americans think there's going to be a Civil War. It's like 50, is that out of 20
But it's like
people?
based
I
on
don't
what,
know.
know? Yeah, like, and plus,
Yeah.
who cares? Like, whenever I see those stats, I'm like, yeah, but like, look at the caliber of human being that you see on the street, bro.
Who's
like,
voting?
I don't give a
Who's
fuck
voting?
what they're saying. Yeah, like, it makes no difference. Do people care? Or do people actually not care that much, but when you ask them an opinion, they give their opinion, and now suddenly people jump on it, thinking that you care more than you do. For example, someone asks you your opinion on abortion. You have an opinion, so you give your opinion, and maybe it actually ends up being something you turn into something that's passionate during that talk. But when you turn off the camera and you go about your normal day, you go back to work, it doesn't actually come up in your head that often because it's not something you're thinking about. But when someone asks you that question, you do have thoughts on it. So when you have a TikTok video and someone says, here's my thoughts on abortion, and people start freaking out because they're like, this person believes this, how can you believe this? Like, well, I care because you asked me.
Like, is there anything out there that you don't like so much that you're willing to stop other people from doing it? For instance, the genocide of Muslims in China right now. If World War III happened and I got drafted, I'd be okay because at least I get to try to save a Muslim child from being murdered. That's something, that's not something I'm going to be like, no, different culture, China, it's okay. Go ahead and do it. Just don't do it here. I'm not going to, no, it's fucking wrong. And I think there's parts of things like that. There's that way of thinking of why people think about abortion. And the reason why I think about abortion so much is because I have to ask myself, am I comfortable living in a society where they allow that? But am I comfortable living in a society where they don't allow people to do what they want? Because when it comes to the rights thing, when people say it's a right, first of all, when we're talking about, legal, like anything that's ever been written down in literature, it's not a right. But if we're talking about I'm a human and I have autonomy, then it's a right because you can do whatever the fuck you want. So it could be a right, and it may not be a right. It depends on how you're looking at it. If we're talking about law, currently it's not a right, and it never has been a right. If you're talking about personal autonomy, then anything's been a right. I mean, like fucking murdering someone by running them over at a red light, that's a right because you have physical autonomy. So it depends on what way you're going at this. So then because I live in a society, I have to say it like 4 times now, because I live in a society, I have to ask myself, do I want to live in a society, pay taxes in a society, support a society that I don't agree with? And I think that's really important because one of the biggest reasons why people don't like abortions is because they're fearful, I guess depending on where you are, that their tax dollars go into supporting abortions. And it's like, listen, I was okay with abortion, but now that I know I'm paying for one, I don't like it. So that's why there's so much going on here. But that's the reason why I think about it so much is because if I'm destined or fated to live in this society and continue building it along with everybody else, I want to have a voice, and I want the society to support the morals that I have, and that's what people who disagree with me also say. Is it alive? It is alive. Is it human? It is human. Those two things cannot be refuted. It is alive. It is human. That is the scientific consensus. It's human because it has that many chromosomes. It has that many. It has 2 sides of that DNA. The question comes is, when do we start caring about it? Right?
Yeah.
When is it conscious? When does it have a soul? Those are things we can't even ask because we don't understand them. But it is human and it is alive. And when you abort it, that's not stopping it from being born, which it is, but that's not just stopping it from being born. That's removing it from existing. That's killing it. You could, if you're okay with that, whatever. That's not the point. The point is you also have to know factually it is alive and it is human. Someone's allowed to think you're evil for doing it, and someone's allowed to think you're righteous for doing it. But the facts are it is alive and it is human, and the facts also are your autonomy, right? That kind of right. It technically is also a right. And then the fourth thing is, but what decisions do we make in a society? So there's like a four-parter: life, human, physical autonomy, yes. Society, we don't know.
Yeah, and it's tough because some people say it should be a legal thing that government has control over whether or not you can or can't, and then, you know, and also like we don't know numbers. Like we have, there's lots of arguments that people can bring up, and they can be nitpicked arguments. They can say, well, X person couldn't get an abortion because they couldn't afford to travel, and say, okay, well, what percentage of people is that happening to? And then you're like, okay, well, if it's only 1%, like, is that even something to bring up at all? And then I remember seeing this comedian, I forget who, it might have been Bill Burr, I don't know who it was.
It is Bill Burr. It is.
Was it Bill Burr? Do you know what I'm talking about? The one where he talking about
the most recent one.
I was baking a cake, or I was baking a pizza or something, and then it's like. All right, wait, I can't even remember it.
You don't take it out of the oven and say that was a cake. Whatever you say, it was funny as fuck.
What was it? It was okay. This is it. So here's the abortion joke that Bill Burr said. He essentially said, "I'm baking a cake. It's in the oven, and about halfway through, someone comes in, takes it out, throws it on the ground, and says, 'What the fuck? That was my cake.'" And the guy goes, "That wasn't a cake." He said, "Well, it would have been if you hadn't pulled it out and destroyed it." And I remember when I saw that, I was like, oh my goodness. That is a very interesting way to look at it, because that's a very visual, realistic, relatable analogy to bring up. And I wish there was a way to talk about that. I mean, we're talking about it because I don't know what makes one person
for the most qualified people in America, Cade.
Well, also
here's most qualified.
I guess. Well, one, neither of us have a uterus, so we're not going to actually have to experience it. People are cloning people. You know that?
Like the superheroes. What?
No, here's the thing. People are cloning people. This is happening right now. Okay, well, and here's the thing. I don't know if it's actually happening. I've just seen people who are scientists on TikTok saying that people are doing it. So who knows if they're actually doing it. But people are saying they're cloning. There's lots of science out there that are doing shit. But that's the point. That brings back to the entire beginning of this discussion, the genesis of the conversation, which was, does any of it matter if we're headed toward an interplanetary species where at some point it will. We're headed toward a situation where likely we are Earthlings, and we are humans, and we identify as Earthlings and as humans. And of course, there's different styles of people on it, but we are just Earthlings. And there will be a day where Earthling is how we identify, rather than girl, boy, cis, this, that, rainbow, dinosaur, whatever we want to call each other.
Here's the thing. I actually think we already identify as human, or we already did. And it wasn't until a movement to become individualized, like, oh no, I'm a trans, they, them, X, or whatever. I don't know. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I just definitely don't know what the pronouns are. Is once we started spreading out pronouns, and once we started being super, super individualized, we actually strayed away from all just being humans.
Sure.
We were like, this is, and it's my opinion, but it really sucks. It really sucks. And it's not something, I'm not trying to open up a new conversation, but when Martin Luther King died, or before he died, the black community was growing. They were doing really well for themselves. They were getting better. They were having families, going to school. Like, of course, there was tremendous amounts of racism, but life was getting better for them. And then after King died, like, there was a huge decline. And I feel like once there's like a sharp change like that, so much progress is lost. And I actually think the hyper-individualism is hurting us more than helping us. Because instead of being like, oh, no, we're all the same, we're saying, no, I'm different, and you better respect my difference. It's like, I can do that without, conforming to what you think society should be like. Additionally, I think there is a man and there's a woman, but you're allowed to be a very, very, very feminine man. And you're allowed to be a very, very, very masculine woman. You don't have to change the entire lexicon for you to actually know who and what you are. I think that comes from a lot of a lot of people nowadays, they feel, what's it called? They like detach from society, they detach from people. They feel lonely, so they feel like they have to make up for that by being interesting and being more of an individual. So they seem more worthwhile. But that's just me. I don't know.
That's interesting because I think differently in a way.
Go ahead.
I think that, well, I agree with what you said. I just think that the direction it goes long term is better. I think that the difference is necessary right now. I think we have to all separate. Well, I don't think we actually need to, but I think the fact that we are, and everyone's saying, well, I'm this, I'm that, you must call me this, you must call me that. I mean, I'm seeing some ridiculous shit on TikTok. I'm seeing like some absolutely ludicrous things out there, but I think the direction of it is basically saying we're all this, and then I think we're going to get to a tipping point where we say, okay, every single human is very different. I think that's the conclusion we come to, and we say, oh, okay, I guess we can accept that we're all just fucking very different, and maybe we don't have to have a different pronoun for each one. And then but I think it's going to take us all. I think it's going to take society getting to a tipping point of saying, okay, this is kind of silly. What are we doing here? To the point where we're like, oh, you know what? While. I think it could take a while, but I think it's the beginning. I think it's a slow rise of what needs to happen. There's a lot of bullshit that has to happen on the way to something different and revolutionary. But I guess I'm on a long time scale there, and I guess for me,
I can see that.
I don't have a horse in the race. I don't particularly need someone. So if I was a whatever pronoun, I don't need anyone else to call me that. I don't draw any kind of satisfaction or anything. If someone calls me something that I want them to call me, they can call me whatever they want. But I think you're right. Like if someone asked me personally, hey, could you say this? I would probably say it just because I'm a decent, like, respectful human being. But like, I don't care. And then if they did, like, I don't care, like, I just don't care, like, I'm just doing my own thing, and I'm scared that the people who do care just aren't working on anything at all, in any sense of the word, in anything in their life. They just aren't working on anything, and so now they attribute their entire identity to, you must call me this or else. And then when they go to work, all they talk about is the fact that no one calls them this, and that people should call them this, and then these are all the things that are happening in their life. And I think there's a lot of people who do think that. But I also do think that there's a huge crowd, which I think is bigger than we think. I just don't think they speak on it because they don't care, which is people like me. The only reason we're talking about it is because I said, let's do a podcast and talk about this shit. But I don't care. It's not like I'm thinking about this in my day-to-day, really. It might come up in my head, but it's just kind of like a fleeting thought, like, hey, that's kind of stupid, or hey, that's kind of a good idea. But then I go, okay, back to work, and I don't care.
If there is a change, if there's going to be like this, eventually we're going to come to a peak where we're like, you know what, all these pronouns, it's pretty exhausting. It's kind of BS. Let's just come up with one or two. We'd end up being the same, but we were in 10 years ago.
But we have to go through all of it to get back to that point, right? That's my point. Like, we have to go through all this just to get back.
But I'm not proud of it. I feel like that's not something to be proud about.
Fuck it, dude. But that's the thing.
We had to go back to adolescence to realize, oh, fuck, we made a mistake, turn back.
But that's the thing, dude. You have to get so far. You have to unlearn everything about yourself just to get back to your childhood self. You have to go play Pokemon all the way to the end and win to realize that at the very beginning, you could have just done that the whole time. It's kind of like how we talked about in my book at some point, beating the boss at level 1.
Oh, no.
You have to beat the boss at level 100 to realize you could have beat him the whole time. But without beating the boss level 100 and going through levels 1 through 99, you couldn't have actually known that for yourself. And I think that's the same for everything in my life, especially. I have to go through it and try it to say, okay, all right, fine. You were right, but I have to go through it.
It's just I think that we have and I know people that are really extreme are going to disagree with me, but I think we have so much freedom, so many freedoms. I think we have so much abundance, so much opportunity that we have burdened ourselves with problems that don't really matter. The reason why you just said, oh, people are going to work or people are going to school, and when they come home, they don't talk about what they accomplished. They just talk about how someone didn't call them by their pronoun. I think it's because they have so much abundance in their life that they have to make up their own problems, because that's what humans do. When humans have too much of a perfect life, you start making up your own problems. That's why no one's ever fucking happy all the time. Happy sometimes, not all the time, because humans need problems. If you don't have problems, oh man, your brain's going to turn to mush. So people have so much abundance that they're making their own problems. However, I do believe people do actually feel trans. I do believe people do actually feel like there's something wrong with who they are. I'm not discounting that. I think that's out there. I think that exists. But I do also think most people only make the decisions they're making in order to feel some form of chaos in their life because they need it.
Yes. Yeah, that was very well put. I think that's very well put. And I think the reason this podcast can work is because neither of us are that extreme. I mean, maybe we have some thoughts that it could be considered extreme, but we also, and the way I say extreme is that I can say something and then you can say something, and we're not going to freak out on each other, because it's like
The SWAT team is headed to your house right now.
Well,
Right
so it's
now,
it's more.
Cade, get ready.
Here's the thing: the main reason we're doing this podcast is to get sound bites. The second main
Biden?
reason,
Send the SWAT over now.
the main reason we're doing this is
Cade,
for
you're
sound
screwed.
bites. I think the sound bites are good, but my main goal is to get people to listen to the full podcast and realize two people can have a conversation that is extreme and has extreme topics, and not freak out and scream at each other that we see on TikTok. You can have a moderate discussion, a mediated discussion, where we can both present points, and then the other person presents points, and we both say, okay, and then we just part ways. Also, this topic was just so big, and you're right. The thing you said about boundaries, when you have no boundaries, there's no limit. There's no boundaries. So like, you can just continue going in this way or that way, and the only person stopping yourself from going all the way is yourself when you stop caring and you say, okay, let's just come back to the middle here. And I think you're right. The people who, like, for example, the reason gender fluidity didn't exist back in caveman days is because people were busy trying to survive. But the thing is, we're not trying to survive anymore. But here's another argument, another entire topic. We're not going back to caveman. We're not ever going back to a life. Okay, if you're watching this video, you're not going back to a life probably of fighting for every single scrap of food. If you're watching TikTok and you're wasting time on YouTube and TikTok, you have a normal ass life, meaning you can probably sort of put food on your table. You can probably kind of afford rent or something. You might have a piece of shit car or something. Like, you have a standard, like, middle class, whatever, not white life, some kind of standard life where you can afford to do stuff, right?
White life?
I know, I was about to say like white picket fence life, but it's not white picket fence.
No.
So you have a standard life that affords you the luxury of wasting time on social media. That's the type of life you're living if you're watching this video. So because of that, you're not fighting to like get food on the table kind of thing. So because of that,
With that being said, my Venmo is.
but because of that, we're not going back to the caveman days, meaning that these problems do exist and they're not going anywhere. They're probably just going to continue just building and building and building and getting worse. And I know there's some arguments on one side saying, well, this doesn't matter, or this only matters because we have too many doors we can open. There's too many options. There's an abundance of conversations we can have. There's an abundance of different problems we could open. And the thing is, they're just going to keep getting bigger because at some point we might be on a track for a universal basic income. Andrew Yang brought that up in the last presidential election.
I have something to say about that.
Go for it.
What's the point of universal? I used to be like, yeah, let's do that. But what's the
Me
point?
too.
Why not just remove taxes? Isn't that the same thing? That's the same thing.
Okay,
Fuck.
no. It's not the same thing when you present it. It's the way it's a narrative is formed around it. The narrative around universal basic income is we don't have enough money to pay for shit that we want to make our lives better, so we're going to give you $1,000. That's the narrative. That's the way they tell the story, though.
Or
They might go to the same
reduce
place.
my taxes by $1,000.
That's the thing. I'm not
Right?
paying $1,000
Is
in
that
taxes. I'm not paying $1,000 in taxes
Yeah,
a
well, it's
month.
because you're fucking Cade Bergman. Shut the fuck up. I don't know. I don't fucking know.
Are you paying $1,000 in
Fucking
taxes?
Maybe.
No, you're not.
That's
If
for
someone
me
gave
and
me
the IRS.
$1,000 a
That's
month,
between me and the IRS. No,
Mark,
I don't know.
if someone
I paid
gave you
$50 in taxes.
$1,000 every single month
Yeah.
on the day of the first month, every month, you got $1,000 paycheck, that would change your life, no?
Oh man, that's the wrong question to ask me. I mean, like, yeah, technically, based upon facts, yeah, changes would happen, but I'm not a money guy. You know, I'm not a consumer.
But that would allow you to open doors you wouldn't normally have.
Wait, I say that while I got all this fucking equipment behind me. Fucking, I'm an idiot. And
$1,000
I got a
a
fucking
month.
shelf full of alcohol. Fuck.
Mark, $1,000 a month would allow you to, that would cover all your basic needs, meaning you could spend more time doing your craft, spending time making a short film or a long film, right?
Let me be clear. I support UBI. I also support the reduction of taxes. In my head, it's basically the same thing. But I support it. The problem is I don't support. I like capitalism, but I think we're in a weird place right now where we don't actually use capitalism the way it's supposed to be used. I think we're corporatism. I think a lot of our country is run by like pharmaceutical companies. It's really rough. But one of the reasons why UBI is dangerous is because if you're like, oh, UBI hit this month, I got $1,500. your landlord will be like, oh, I know they have an extra $1,500. That
True.
happens. It happened with the education system. The reason why college is so expensive is, well, one of the reasons is because when the government was like, we don't want people to be losers anymore. We want to pay for the college. You know what? Everyone gets some loans, and let's do it. And then the banks and the schools and everyone was like, oh, you're getting free money? Well, we're going to raise the prices. So now we're back at ground zero, square one.
Yep.
So it doesn't matter. So the problem isn't like we have too much money, we have too little money. The problem is greed. I talked about that in the essay video I made. We are greedy. It's just who we are. It's not something to be ashamed. Well, you could be ashamed of it, but it's not something to be ashamed of, like, oh no, like I'm an evil person. It's just how humans work. So until we fix, like price gouging, until we fix like that greed, which takes a huge cultural shift, until we fix that, I don't think UBI is going to fix anything.
Is everything mutually exclusive? This can go to everything we just talked about. Does everything have to be mutually exclusive? Or are things mutually exclusive? Can you have something like abortion or fluidity? Can you have one and the other on both sides of that? Like when we see the arguments in the street, right now we're living in that. We're living in a world where they're not mutually exclusive. Everything's all happening at the same time, but it's chaos. So like, is that something we want? Or is that something where we put our foot down and say no or yes?
Well, that's like the abortion argument, right? Where I was like, I think about it so often because I have to decide what kind of society I want to live in, what kind of society I want to support. So I think that's the argument with libertarianism. I used to say, yo, I'm a libertarian just because it sounded like it made sense. Like it's kind of like the middle ground, kind of. And I heard someone explain libertarianism like, you could be a libertarian, but there are things that are wrong. There are, like, you should not be able to murder someone for fun. That's wrong, right? And I'm not saying.
But then someone says, "But what does fun mean, bro? What does fun mean? Fun for me could be this. Well, I came from Russia. I came from this place. I came from this other place."
Right. So eventually, there are things that need to be decided upon. Decisions need to be made. So I don't think
who's going to make those decisions, though. Who's qualified?
So I don't.
Who's qualified? You went to college? You have 10 years of political experience? Are you qualified now? Like, who's qualified? Did you go and live in a third world country for 6 months? Does that make you qualified? You know what I mean? Like, that's where everything is kind of fucked.
And that's why, so I'm going to go back to this, where the only way to fix big problems like these is to have a huge cultural shift. For instance, if you go to Japan, the way children are raised, the way they treat their elders, the way they treat their society, like how clean the streets are, all that stuff, that's not something that could be taught to an old society. That's something that has to be learned and ingrained in society from its conception.
Yeah.
For us to really have all the same ethics and morals, for us to have the same values, it has to be taught in us from conception. I think America had that for a little while, but we had that in our infancy. And if America was an old country, like I'm talking about at least 1,000 years old, I think it'd be different. I think
you're right, because all the countries that are different.
Yeah,
they are different.
We'd have a much richer and deeper values. But because we're only, like 250 years old, we're coming on that mark pretty soon, we don't actually have all the same values. Also because and I'm not against it. I'm not against immigration. That's not what I'm saying. But because we invite and house so many migrants, it's hard to all have one value, because American value is world value. We don't, so it's weird. It's hard because we're so different. It's hard to decide on one thing. And you're like, yeah, well, okay, you're right. But when it comes time to decide, who decides? And I think no one could decide until we reframe our culture, until we all are on the same playing field.
Yeah, and the way that some people are headed is decentralization. With this what's it called? Not cyber, crypto decentralization. Well, everyone can decide. It's a DAO. It's an autonomous, decentralized autonomous organization. Okay, that doesn't work though, because who's in that DAO? It becomes the same exact problem here. And I had a podcast with my friend David, who had this ideology that he thought if we were to bring back this extinct man-eating bird thing, that would make society better, because that would make us stop worrying about shit that doesn't matter, Then and I told him, I was like, okay, well, that's not gonna happen. Well, okay, I guess it could happen, but I guess his idea there is obviously, if we have to now fight for our lives for something, if World War III happens, if something cataclysmic happens to society now, and we now have to worry about our lives again, that changes the entire game. And is that necessary? Is that the most necessary thing that could happen? Is that going to be something that we should happen? It's like the idea with in the Marvel show with Loki at the very end. They killed the Grand Master because they said, this is not our peace. And he said, no, it is peace. Objectively, this is peace. This is what must happen for the way of the universe so that it doesn't fall into chaos. And these people said, no, we'd rather have the chaos. We want the chaos because we don't like this. And so they killed him. And then they said, oh shit, now we really have to start working. And the guy said, well, if you just didn't kill me, you wouldn't have had to worry about it. And he's just, but that's the thing. We do want to worry about it. We're going to figure it out. And so they do it. And then now we're too deep into this hole. Yeah, that's an entire conversation for another day.